My name is Brianna, and for most of my life I believed I was just a nanny living in a wealthy family's basement. I thought my purpose in life was to serve other people quietly, to exist in the background, to be grateful for whatever scraps of stability I was given. I never imagined that the family I worked for was actually my real family, and that I was their kidnapped daughter. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I started working for the Patterson family when I was 18. I had just aged out of the foster care system. No parents, no siblings, no grandparents, nothing. I had grown up bouncing between homes, never staying long enough to feel safe. When I turned 18, the system basically said, "Good luck," and pushed me out. So when I saw the job posting, live-in nanny needed for wealthy family in Fairfield, Connecticut, I applied immediately. When I arrived at the Patterson house for the interview, I felt like I had stepped into a movie. The house was massive, white colonial style, tall columns, huge windows, a circular driveway with a black Mercedes and a Porsche parked outside. The lawn was perfect, like a golf course. Everything smelled expensive, fresh flowers, clean air, money. Donna Patterson opened the door. She looked like a magazine model, blonde hair, perfect makeup, diamonds on her wrist. She barely looked at my resume. "We need someone quiet," she said. "Someone who doesn't cause problems, someone who knows their place." I nodded. I needed this job more than anything. She offered me a small salary and a room in the basement. It wasn't much, but it was stable. It was more than I had ever had. So I said yes. I didn't know that basement would feel like a prison. My room was small, concrete floor, a thin mattress on a metal frame, a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. No real window, just a tiny vent near the ceiling that let in a stripe of light. Next to my room was the laundry area, stacks of storage boxes, and the furnace that made loud noises at night. In the summer, the basement was damp and smelled like mold. In the winter, it was freezing, and I slept in layers of sweaters and hoodies. But I told myself I was lucky. Every morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. I made breakfast for Gerald, Donna, and their son Brandon. I cleaned the kitchen, washed clothes, organized the house, polished the marble counters, wiped fingerprints off the stainless steel appliances. Brandon slept until noon, in his huge bedroom upstairs, with a king-size bed and a private bathroom. He drove a BMW, wore designer clothes, and had the latest phone before it even came out. I felt like a ghost in the house. Sometimes I would hear them laughing upstairs, talking about vacations in Europe, business deals, parties with rich friends. Meanwhile, I was downstairs folding laundry and scrubbing floors. But I didn't complain. I was used to being invisible. One thing always bothered me. I looked different from them. Gerald and Donna were both blonde, blue-eyed, pale. Brandon looked exactly like them. But I had green eyes, dark brown hair, and slightly darker skin. People sometimes assumed I was related somehow. Donna would quickly correct them. "She's our nanny," she'd say with a smile. "She lives with us." I never thought much of it. Genetics are weird. Foster care paperwork is messy. I didn't know my parents, so who could I compare myself to? Still, sometimes when I looked in the mirror, I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. Everything changed when Brandon announced he was getting married. He was marrying Victoria Whitmore, the daughter of Richard Whitmore, a billionaire investor and one of the most powerful people in finance. Donna was obsessed with this wedding. She acted like it was a royal event. The house was suddenly full of wedding planners, decorators, florists, chefs. There were boxes of designer invitations, luxury gift bags, racks of dresses, trays of jewelry. I worked nonstop. I barely slept. I felt like I was drowning in flowers, champagne, and pressure. During the rehearsal dinner, I was serving champagne when Victoria approached me. She was beautiful, tall, elegant, kind-looking. "You're Brandon's sister?" she asked. "No," I said quietly. "I'm the nanny." Her eyes widened. "You live here?" "Yes." Before she could ask more, Donna walked over, smiling tightly. "Brianna is practically part of the family," Donna said. "She's very humble. She prefers staying in the background." Victoria nodded politely and walked away, but she looked confused. That's when I felt someone watching me. I looked up and saw Richard Whitmore staring at me. Not just glancing. Staring. Like he had seen a ghost. Later that evening, he approached me. "You're Brianna?" he asked. "Yes, sir." He studied my face for a long moment. It made me uncomfortable. "Do you know who your real mother is?" he asked quietly. I laughed nervously. "I grew up in foster care. I never knew my parents." His expression changed. His hand tightened around his glass. "I see," he said softly. But he didn't look convinced. On the wedding day, everything felt unreal. The garden was full of white roses, fairy lights, and a string orchestra. Guests arrived in designer gowns and tailored suits. It looked like a luxury movie set. I was running around with trays, refilling glasses, cleaning up small messes. But Richard kept looking at me. Finally, he approached me again. "Can we talk?" he asked. We walked to a quiet corner of the garden, away from the guests. "You remind me of someone," he said. "Who?" I asked. "My daughter," he said quietly. I felt my stomach drop. She disappeared 23 years ago, kidnapped from Stanford Hospital. My wife never recovered from it. Neither did I. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "That's horrible." He nodded. "I've spent 23 years searching for her, and when I saw you, it felt like looking at her again." He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. A woman holding a newborn baby. The woman looked like me. The baby looked like me. My hands started shaking. "This is impossible," I whispered. "I want to do a DNA test," he said gently. I felt dizzy. Part of me wanted to run away. Part of me wanted to know the truth more than anything. So I agreed. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I still woke up at 5 a.m., still cleaned, still lived in the basement. But everything felt different. I started noticing things I had never questioned before. I had no birth certificate, no baby photos, no stories about my childhood before foster care. My foster records had gaps, years missing. I started feeling scared. What if someone had erased my past? When Richard called, I was in the laundry room. "Brianna," he said, his voice shaking. "The results are back." I held my breath. "You are Margaret Whitmore's daughter." The room went silent. I dropped the phone. I felt like I was floating outside my body. I wasn't a nobody. I wasn't just a nanny. I wasn't just a foster kid. I was kidnapped. Richard explained everything. In 2003, his newborn daughter disappeared from Stanford Hospital. Security footage disappeared. Records were altered. The case went cold. Gerald and Donna Patterson had been living in California at the time. Donna had worked as a nurse assistant. They took me. They changed my identity. They erased me. And years later, I ended up working as a nanny in my own family's house. They hired their kidnapped daughter as their servant. I felt sick. I thought about every morning I cleaned their kitchen. Every time Donna called me humble. Every time Gerald ignored me. Every time Brandon treated me like furniture. They knew, or at least they suspected, and they didn't care. Richard contacted federal authorities. He invited the Pattersons to his estate, pretending it was a celebration after the wedding. They arrived smiling, wearing expensive clothes, acting like everything was perfect. I stood in the living room, my heart pounding so loud I thought they could hear it. Then federal agents walked in. "Gerald Patterson and Donna Patterson, you are under arrest for kidnapping, human trafficking, document forgery, and unlawful detention of a minor." Donna screamed. Gerald tried to run. Brandon stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. And I just stood there. For the first time in my life, I felt free. The moment the agents put handcuffs on Gerald and Donna, everything around me felt unreal. Like I was watching a movie about someone else's life. Donna was screaming my name. "Brianna, Brianna, tell them this is a mistake. Tell them." Her voice cracked, and for a second, I almost felt pity. Almost. Gerald was shouting that it was all a misunderstanding, that Richard Whitmore was manipulating the situation, that this was a setup. He tried to move toward me, but 2 agents grabbed him and forced him back. Brandon just stood there. He looked at me like I was a stranger, like he was trying to connect memories that suddenly didn't make sense. The basement, the chores, the way his parents treated me. I could see the realization slowly spreading across his face, and I felt something twist inside my chest. For years I thought he was just spoiled and cruel, but in that moment I realized he had been living in a lie too. Just a different kind of lie. Richard stood beside me. He didn't touch me, but his presence felt protective. "You're safe now," he whispered. Safe. I had never felt that word applied to me before. That night, I didn't go back to the basement. Richard took me to his estate. It was bigger than the Patterson house. Much bigger. A long driveway, gates, security guards, fountains, art on the walls that looked like it belonged in museums. He gave me a guest room that was bigger than the entire basement. I sat on the bed for hours, staring at the ceiling. I didn't know who I was anymore. Was I Brianna, the foster kid and nanny? Or was I someone else's daughter? Someone important, someone rich, someone who had been loved. The next day I met Margaret Whitmore, my mother. She was sitting in a sunlit room looking out at the garden. Her hair was brown like mine but streaked with gray. Her hands trembled when she saw me. For a long moment she just stared, then she started crying. She walked toward me slowly, like she was afraid I might disappear. "You're real," she whispered. "You're really here." She touched my face, my hair, my hands, like she was memorizing me. "I looked for you every day," she said through tears. "Every single day." I didn't know what to say. I felt angry. I felt sad. I felt empty. She hugged me and I froze at first. I wasn't used to being hugged. Not like that. Not by someone who loved me. The media found out within days. Headlines were everywhere. Billionaire's daughter kidnapped as infant, found living as nanny in abductor's home. Shocking case of child trafficking hidden in elite Connecticut family. Reporters camped outside the Whitmore estate. My face was on TV. People analyzed my childhood photos, my foster records, my resemblance to Margaret. Strangers were commenting on my life. Some people called me lucky. Some called me a victim. Some said it sounded fake. I didn't feel lucky. I felt broken. The court case started months later. Gerald and Donna pleaded not guilty. Their lawyers claimed I was never kidnapped, that I was adopted unofficially, that Richard Whitmore was using his power to destroy them. But the evidence was overwhelming. Hospital records, witnesses, forged documents, DNA results. Donna broke down on the stand. She said she had always wanted a daughter, that she felt Margaret didn't deserve me, that she thought she could give me a better life. I almost laughed. A better life? A basement, no identity, no school, no freedom. Gerald said he only agreed because Donna convinced him, that he thought it was temporary, that he never imagined it would go this far. They both blamed each other. They never apologized to me. Brandon testified too. He said he never knew, that he thought I was just a nanny they had hired when he was a teenager, that he noticed how differently I was treated, but he thought it was normal. "I thought my parents were strict," he said quietly. "I didn't realize they were criminals." He looked at me once during his testimony. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know what to feel. He was my brother, but he was also part of the life that trapped me." When the verdict came, the courtroom was silent. Guilty on all counts: kidnapping, human trafficking, document forgery, unlawful detention. They were sentenced to decades in prison. Donna screamed. Gerald stared straight ahead, expressionless. I felt relief and grief and something else I couldn't name. After the trial, my life changed overnight. I moved into the Whitmore estate officially. They hired therapists, tutors, life coaches, people to teach me things most people learn as children: how to open a bank account, how to apply for a passport. But sometimes I missed the basement. It sounds insane, but it was familiar. This new life felt like a costume. Margaret tried so hard to be my mother. She asked me what I liked to eat, what music I liked, what my dreams were. I didn't know how to answer. I had never been allowed to dream. Sometimes she would cry randomly, apologizing for not finding me sooner. I would sit there, not knowing how to comfort her. We were strangers connected by DNA and tragedy. The strangest part was the guilt. I felt guilty for living in luxury when I had spent my life believing I deserved nothing. I felt guilty for hating the Pattersons, even though they destroyed my life. I felt guilty for not feeling more connected to my real family. Trauma is complicated. One night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the Whitmore mansion, touching the walls, the paintings, the furniture. This could have been my life. I could have grown up here. Instead, I grew up scrubbing someone else's floors. I sat on the stairs and cried for the childhood I never had. A year later, I did my first interview. The host asked me, what was the hardest part of discovering the truth? I thought about it for a long time. The hardest part, I said, was realizing that my life was designed. Every insult, every restriction, every lie. It wasn't random, it was intentional. The audience was silent. Sometimes I still dream about the basement. Sometimes I wake up at bed a.m. out of habit. Sometimes I feel like I don't deserve this life. But then I remember, I was stolen. I was erased. But I was found. My life was never the same again. After the trial, I thought the worst was behind me, that now I could finally live like a normal person. love myself, and be loved. But reality was far more complicated. Thanks to the DNA test and the court case, I gained everything I was legally entitled to: the status of a Whitmore daughter, access to all assets, inheritance, and the attention of my real family. But inside, something was permanently broken. 23 years of my life, counting the time with the Pattersons, felt stolen, taken away. It wasn't just lost time, it was a life someone had stolen from me. The first weeks after moving in, I tried to fit into my new life. I got up at 5 a.m., like before, and prepared breakfast for myself. The smell of the coffee machine, freshly baked bread, and fruit filled the air. But I realized it was someone else's routine. I looked at my hands and thought, these hands had worked for 23 years for people who never loved me, and now they were meant to handle billions. It felt strange, almost unreal. My mother, Margaret, was constantly by my side. She tried to teach me everything my real family should have, but I felt like a stranger in her life. Sometimes I saw her cry, just looking at me, and I understood. She felt the years stolen from her along with me. But I also felt guilt. I couldn't cry for myself. I couldn't enjoy my new home or life. Everything was tangled together: joy, fear, anger, despair. Then Brandon returned. He tried to build a relationship. At first it was cautious words, then invitations to walks, lunches, family gatherings. "We're siblings," he said, but there was still an invisible chasm between us. I remembered every humiliation, every order, every second he didn't see me as a human being. I wanted to believe he really didn't know. But deep down, I understood. He was part of the system that destroyed my childhood. And then something I never expected happened. One late night, I found a letter hidden in the old Patterson's safe, which Gerald had kept at home for emergencies. My hands shook so violently that I could barely hold the paper. It was a letter from my mother, Margaret, addressed to Gerald and Donna. She wrote that she knew her daughter had been stolen. She described all her suspicions, her attempts to find me, but there was a strange confession. It said, "I know someone has her, and I cannot intervene. I am afraid for her, I am afraid for myself, but one day we will be together." And that's when I realized something terrible. Gerald and Donna hadn't just taken me as a nanny or child. They knew who I was. They deliberately kept me under control, hiding my identity, playing with my fate. I wasn't just a servant. I was a hostage, a toy in a game where they decided how much pain I should endure. Then a cold, sharp sense of vengeance came over me. I didn't want to just live. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the terror I had endured. I began to plan. I contacted the federal agents involved in the arrests. I asked them to show me all the documents about Gerald and Donna's crimes. I studied their financial accounts, contacts, and secret operations. Everything they had hidden was there, and now I knew I could use it. But the most shocking revelation came when I realized their plan went far beyond me. They had other children, other families, other secrets locked away in their homes. I understood. I was just one of many victims of their system, and then I made a decision. I would never again be a victim. I used my inheritance, my influence, and my resources. I hired a team of lawyers and private detectives to investigate all their hidden operations. Within months, Gerald and Donna were not only in prison, their empire was crumbling. Banks froze accounts, companies closed, friends turned away. I watched it all unfold, and a mixture of relief and cold satisfaction filled me. Yet at the same time, I felt a strange emptiness. Revenge hadn't given me happiness. It only confirmed the horrors I had survived. I looked in the mirror and, for the first time, saw not a nanny or a servant, but a person who had endured hell and survived. My mother embraced me that day. She said nothing. We simply sat together and cried. She didn't ask how I felt. I realized that sometimes love is just presence, not words or actions. Brandon came to see us later. We sat at the table and he tried to smile, but it was awkward. He said, "I want to be part of your life if you let me." I remained silent, and inside me something shifted. I knew I could forgive, but I would never forget. Never. The past would always be a part of me. The past that made me strong. The past that made me who I am. I would never be a nanny again. I would never be a servant again. I am Brianna Ashford Whitmore. I survived despite everything. And now the world must know. I will never allow myself to be stolen again. Sometimes late at night I still see that little girl in the Pattersons' basement, and I smile at her. I say, "I found you. We're together, and now we are free. And then I realize, even after 23 years of hell, even after betrayal and pain, I survived. I live, and that is the greatest miracle of all.